Welcome to the High Vibration Reset, the podcast for women ready to step into their next level of success without burnout, overthinking, or ever feeling undervalued. I'm Ciara Conlon, your host, and for the past 18 years, I've been helping women take full ownership of their growth, of their voice, their work, and their leadership. And it's not just to help them succeed personally, but to create real impact in their communities, workplaces, and in the world. In today's episode, I'm joined by the wonderful Moira Geary, a woman whose work has impacted so many women, including me. Moira is a mentor, a guide, and I'm privileged to say a friend. And I'm delighted that I can share her brilliance with you today. Now, Moira describes herself as a transformational teacher, but she is a transformational change agent whose goal is really to evolve human awareness and consciousness. And she does this through her books, her free Facebook group, her many programs and live events. Moira shares her journey in the podcast from nursing to building probably one of Ireland's largest personal development brands. And in the podcast, we talk about emotional patterns, intuition, transformation, and how to shift your perspective so that you can finally move forward. What I love about Moira, apart from her depth of knowledge and wisdom, is her practical, no-bull approach to change. She is a lover of science, but also, I believe, has a deep connection to the divine. We'll get into her episode momentarily. So this episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Life Flow Planner. The Life Flow Planner is not just a journal, it's a practical and thorough goal-setting system designed to help you stay on track. And the planner is supported by the Life Flow community. If you need or want more clarity and focus in your week, you can join the Life Flow community for accountability so you can knock procrastination on the head and imagine a life with no more overwhelm, just ease and flow. Now you'll find the details of both in the show notes. So let's dive into this week's episode. So hello, Moira, and thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I'm delighted to have you here, and I would love for you to start by telling us, how did you go from being a nurse to having one of the top personal development companies in Ireland at the moment?
Well, first of all, Ciara, just to say thank you so much for having me. I love having an old podcast chat, and particularly with you because I know you, and I love you so much so thank you for that. And I suppose to answer your question in terms of going from being a nurse to then going into the personal development space and growing a business, I don't know if I'm in the top now, but actually it doesn't really matter where I am. It is successful and people get the help, and that's the most important
Absolutely.
piece. But so I suppose in nursing, and even before nursing, I always had a great interest in people, specifically why they did what they did. I'm still fascinated by it. My poor husband, Jeff, I drive him mad because I'd be saying to him, I think the reason why you did that is this, and this, because I'd be, working things out. But anyway, not that I would ever say I know, I would say I think, just to put that caveat in. So always hugely interested in what drives people and why some people, through nursing, very much why, I've met people that were in the most devastating situations, obviously in hospitals, and how come some people dealt with it differently to others if they were in awful situations, and then other people that were in situations where I would have considered, because I did midwifery as well, hugely elated and whatever, but they might have responded in a very different way. So it always has fascinated me. And the first book I ever bought when I was about 15 was a book called Man Watching by Desmond Morris, way back, and it was all about body language and all the rest of it. Now, if you read it now, you probably think, God, it was great, and it was very ahead of its time then, but we know so much more now. So that's where everything kind of started. When I left nursing, when I finished and qualified as a nurse, I did a bit of a stint here in Limerick, and then Jeff and I got married and we decided we'd head off to London. So going to London in the 80s and nursing in London in the 80s really opened my mind. First of all, that there were other, I always knew there were other religions, but other cultures, religions. And obviously, I worked with people from all over the world. And when you really get into understanding and seeing how other people see the world, for lots of different reasons, and also been open up to other modalities. That was the start of it. I never knew anything about, I did Reiki nearly 40 years ago. If I mentioned it when I came home on holidays, people would think I joined a cult. Sure, half the country now had Reiki done. But so I was exposed to all of that, way, way back. And I had a huge curiosity. So there was a lot of the holistic stuff, and there was also a lot of the personal development stuff. So neurolinguistics, NLP, a lot of those kind of modalities that I became aware of and started to get interested in, started to study. So that was kind of my hobby in the background. But then I started to have babies. Now it was 8 years later. And we had Joe, and then I was pregnant with Dan. We decided to come home, and then I had Connor quickly, and then I decided to stay at home, or we decided I'd stay at home for a few years at least. And that was the start of it, because I couldn't sit still, even though I was busy with 3 kids. I started to dabble and started to, work with people and share some of the knowledge that I had, and people were very interested in it. I then had a very debilitating 4 years where I went into a very deep state of anxiousness, and I would say even at times the state I was in was quite depressed. And I know now what that was about. It was my own patterns and I suppose through all of the personal development, I could work it out, even though I did go for traditional. I did go to see my GP eventually and did all of that stuff. But in the end, I actually worked it out myself and worked myself out of that state. It took a while, but I suppose I had to experience that to know that it was possible. And also after that, when people were asking me about, helping them to overcome blocks and, feeling stuck or a lot of fear if they wanted to step out in their businesses or their careers or in relationships, that I kind of thought, try this or give that a go or whatever. And it actually was working for them. So that was kind of where it started. Then I got really passionate about it because people were getting results, and I'm very results orientated. I know I am, which isn't necessarily the best thing if you want to be in a high vibe. But I am, that's just my personality. So I suppose what brings me the most joy, or a lot of, maybe not the most, my boys give me, and my boys, including Jeff, bring me my most joy. But the next thing is clients just coming back going, that was so simple. I can't believe I didn't understand or know about that, and my life has changed. And it can be that, and I'm not saying everything, I don't want to be doing the happy clappy and the toxic positivity thing, but I also have huge amounts of evidence that, yes, some one thing can be enough to literally flip something, change perspective, reframe something. That in itself can have a massively positive impact. So that's kind of where it went. And then I suppose I got also hooked on the whole idea of online way back. And I suppose I was very early to do that in Ireland. There weren't many people, if any, doing it when I started. So we're back to pre-2009. I was started my first online program, and that fascinated me, that you could actually help people all over the world, and I could do it with my slippers. With my
lovely slippers they are. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I always would have the hot water bottle with me as well. And the boys used to laugh and say, God, ma'am, you don't even have to go out to work. Say, I know, yeah. But anyway, but also lovely clients and people that knew I was in my slippers and had my hot water bottle. But anyway, so that's kind of how it happened, Ciara.
Yeah. And I am one of those people that you did transform. So that is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on, because you definitely were a catalyst for me for a lot of change. And as you know, I've been a coach for years.
Yeah.
But
I'm glad you said you changed that too, because I didn't transform you at all. I'm probably was a catalyst. You did the work, because I can't. I don't. I just, if I say something and it lands with somebody, but it's not me that does it. Yeah.
And I love that about you. That there's that humbleness as well, and in how much you do impact people's lives. But I did your QTT course.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting for me, because not only did it, all of the techniques and the tools that you teach people, teach me a lot and help me shift some of my emotional blocks. But interestingly, that was what opened up for me the probably my healing side.
Right.
I started to experience and feel energy
Mm.
from doing that work, which led me on then to, like you, always want to understand, and led me on to the path of, doing more energy work and emotional or intuitive healing
Yeah.
and all of that side. But a lot of your work, while there is that energy element of it, they're very practical science-based tools.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose, even you saying that, and you say that you went on to the heal side, whatever. I mean, when I talk about QTT, which is quantum thinking transformation, I would never say to somebody, oh, it's a healing modality. Of course it is. Every coaching is healing. All of them are healing. But I suppose the client that I attract more, and also my own personality, is a bit like you, Ciara, practical, logical, straightforward. Here are the steps, make sense, and it'll, work it out. However, I was probably in denial a bit of the whole energy side for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's not that I was afraid to talk about it. I just was in denial. I was, because actually I had an experience where I know I wasn't looking after myself energetically, working with a lot of clients. And then I got a big hit where I physically didn't feel well for quite a while. And it was all energies that I hadn't been protecting myself. But anyway, that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
But I really feel that the mix of the two, because when we do the practical stuff, it does have a massive energetic shift, huge.
Yes.
And it's the energetic shifts that's where the real thing is. But it's hard to describe it because it's, the other tools you're saying, they're scientifically based. Yeah, I use a lot of neurolinguistics, I use a lot of all sorts of personal development tools, and obviously my own experience. And then I've created a couple of different frameworks that really work. Yeah. Because it's all practical, but it's very easy to explain that, but it's not so easy to explain the woo side. And I suppose because I like to be able to explain as much as I can, and as much as I've experienced, or as much as I know the clients have experienced. But I think the two working together is perfection. Yeah,
absolutely. And would you, I often think that emotion is just energy. Would you agree with that? Or, what do you think is actually happening when we are shifting the blocks, shifting all of these things that have held us back?
Well, it's really interesting in terms of the word emotion, because I did a master's in psychotherapy a few years ago, and my research thing was on emotions and the basically how, the impact of emotions in the therapeutic process. And if you go looking for a definition of emotion, it's probably one of the most argued things in the whole psychology world, psychotherapy world, psychiatry world. So there isn't really a definitive definition for it. And I suppose what I understand it to be is that when we have an experience, which is nothing, it isn't the emotion, but it's our response to an experience that creates a physical sensation and also an energetic sensation, because we can feel it in our body. It's that reaction to the actual experience. And that reaction is actually physiological. In other words, when we're exposed to the experience, our endocrine system will fire off different things, like, let's say, if it's a fright, it's adrenaline or noradrenaline or cortisol, so the stress hormones. And when those stress hormones are released into our bloodstream, which they are, and then we start to feel a dry mouth, short of breath, racing heart, it's just our body reacting to the situation to keep us safe. So what's happening there is that we are getting ready to fight or flight or flee. So to me, an emotion is that feeling that we're feeling physically in our body. And when we repeat an emotion over and over and over and over again, if we go to the whole neuroscience subject, Hebb's law, neurons that fire together wire together. In other words, the more often we repeat an action or a memory or a whatever it is, a behavior where there is emotion attached to it, and the more we do it, the more we embed it that bit deeper. It's just our subconscious gets used to knowing, and it's very familiar, so it'll fire off the same feeling. And that's what happened to me when I had a couple of experiences in my around academia, actually. So school, leaving cert, really an abysmal leaving cert. And I remember when I got my results, the day, the time, the moment, and the shame I felt, and the feeling of isolation, and that I didn't belong, and all of those things, and that fear of rejection. So I at that moment when that happened, I would have felt that feeling. It was, again, like Hebb's law, the neurons fired and wired. And I would have gone back and thought about that a lot. And the more I thought about it, the more it fired and wired. I then would have squashed that down. So it's a little bit like trying to keep a football underwater. And then I had other experiences where I tried to keep footballs underwater. Another one was my nursing. I failed my surgery. I was another big football. I didn't graduate with my group. We were also close, still are close, like 40 years later. So I had these balls underneath the water. And basically, anytime I thought of that fear of rejection, that fear of not being enough, that fear of not being good enough. But I also wanted then to get out and have a business, or, have a
Yeah.
success in some way in my life. And when I went to do that, and it wasn't this business, it was another business that I had. It was around skincare, and I created a beautiful range of skincare products. But when I went to move out to actually promote them, I went into absolute unbelievable anxiety, where I couldn't function. I really wasn't functioning. And it had nothing to do with the business. It had to do with all of those years of the firing and wiring. So to me, that's what the emotion, where the
Yeah.
emotion gets started, what it is, and how it can actually impact us. Now, that is in a negative way. Obviously, I had loads of experiences where they would have impacted me in a very positive way too, because I
Positive. Yeah.
wouldn't be driven to go out and do things unless. So by working on that pattern and releasing all of that energy out of my body, out of my physical body. That meant that when I went to step out and do something, I wasn't feeling the fear anymore, which meant that I actually could go out and do what I needed to do. And that then starts to build your confidence, because once you start doing something and there's a good result, you start to create a belief system around it, and that will just start to grow and grow and grow, and the belief will get stronger. So in a positive way. So it's
So
a very
you were
long-winded
your,
answer.
yeah, no, it's brilliant. You were your first guinea pig. So everything you teach people, you tried out on yourself and you saw that worked. Yeah.
To be honest, Ciara, I in the beginning, I only really talked about things that worked for me, because why would I talk about other things? It was I'm really into experiential. So if I didn't experience it, how can I teach it to somebody else? Now, as the years went on, obviously I worked with clients where they got results in areas that I hadn't experienced. But that meant that, oh, well, at least I knew their story in great depth, and I support them through working through their blocks in different areas. So yes, I could use that then with other clients going forward, even though I hadn't necessarily experienced those things. But to be honest, at the end of the day, it's really fundamental. It doesn't matter what's happening to somebody. It's about the emotion, and it's about it being blocked in our bodies, and it's about working on that, really. But not always just the emotion, but no matter what you work on, the emotion is going to change. Because really, all people want is to feel a different way. That's really ultimately what we're looking for, is that if you were to narrow the whole thing down, the reason why people are listening to this podcast, the reason why we read books, what we're looking to do is to know that we can feel different. And it's not that we're all feeling bad. It's that we might want to feel a little bit more excitement, or a bit more joy, or a bit more whatever. And that's
Yeah.
really what we're
Peace,
looking for.
happiness,
Yeah,
peace, flow, all of
yeah,
those, all of the good stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it doesn't really, the technique is the same regardless of what you're dealing with, whether it's fear, shame, guilt. We use the same techniques to release those blocks. And just to
The
explain
energy.
more,
Mm, mm.
how does that emotional and mental connection happen? How do we, because when we're working on a block, it's not just enough to release the emotion from the body. We also need to do something with the mind, as you say, the neurons that
Yes. Yeah.
wire together over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest things that I would have experienced personally, and also observed with clients in relation to that, is that when we see something from a different perspective, that is enough to completely flip something. Because let's just say you're looking at something in a particular way, and you can't see it any other way because that's the way you've experienced it and that's the way you've lived life around it, and you're really blocked and stuck and you don't know how to move forward. Well, then you're going to stay stuck. Whereas if somebody else that has had a different experience was to come in and talk about their experience and how they overcame that thing, that would kind of open your mind to there's actually a possibility that I can fix this. Now, remember, once you've seen what they've said, you can't unsee it. So you can't ever go back to the way you are. But remember, the way you are seeing now, that is dictating how you're feeling. It always does. So how we see the world will dictate how we feel. So if I'm feeling stuck and blocked and whatever, awful all the time, and I can't see an answer to changing my situation, but somebody over here now has offered me a way of looking at it differently. And while I'm looking at it through their eyes, what will happen is I have to feel differently. So once you feel differently from another angle, it means that you can never go back to fully unless you choose to. And often when we're in victim mode and at that lower energy, that very slow vibration, then we often people will go back, and because it's comfortable and safe to stay here, even though it's miserable, that sometimes people will stay stuck. But I would have noticed over the years a perceptual change or a reframe, and that's, I suppose, like that's what the power of coaching. Been asked good questions. It's just fabulous because it just gets people to open their minds and see things differently. Simple technique, the problem, not problem, in the 7-day positivity project, same thing. What we're doing is we're getting people to disassociate from the problem and pushing it out, not throwing it away, leaving it there, but also going, the solution's never in it. The solution is in what we call the not problem, which is everywhere else. And when people actually experience that, you can see in their body, everything expands. It's just, there's just a whole big release. And that can be enough to do it. Something as simple as that.
So tell me this, a lot of coaches or a lot of techniques out there, they promise transformation. And the experience for some people is that, it might work for a certain percentage of people, but it doesn't seem to work for everybody. So you've worked with a hell of a lot of women at this stage, and lots of people, men and women, but predominantly women. And Moira, do you see in your experience that, that every individual is different and has a different amount of healing to do? Or do you see that if they follow a certain process, there's enough of a change or a transformation? You know what I'm trying to get to here?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. So there's kind of two angles on that I just would like to talk about. So the first thing is that a lot of people would have said to me over the years, God, Moira, you get great results with clients. And I did. And the reason was I vetted them well. That's the first thing. So I made sure that we had really good conversations around, were they ready to do the work? Were they willing to do the work? And also that if they were to work with me one-to-one, which I don't do anymore, by the way, we were looking at 2 or 3 sessions, and that they weren't going to be with me for months. And some people didn't like that, so they weren't right for me. So I had people that were willing to do the work, knew what they wanted to work on. And so that was one reason why the results were good. The second is the techniques are incredible. So that was the second. The third one then would be checking the ecology for the person. So, because it's never, I just think it's awful to ever try and decide as a coach, therapist, whatever you are, personal development practitioner, that, somebody has to change because you found a pattern that's not working for them. We've no right ever to decide that. So it would be always that the client, and I would always check, and that from training in QTT, we always check the ecology. So we check with them, is it good for them? Is it good for their relationships? Is it good for their family? Is it good for their... So they'd sit and they go, okay, do I really want to make this change? When you're at that stage of the process, that's very important. And I think that's another reason why a lot of my clients would have got really good results. Now, the other thing there is, and that's the reason why I would have got good results with myself. However, I do believe, and actually it's interesting because I've had an incredible experience over the last couple of years. Not nice, but incredible experience. And I definitely am coming out the tunnel now. It's like I feel like I'm 98% out. Brilliant. So I talked about the anxiety many years ago and processing that. And I, probably in my naivety, went, oh my God, I'll never go back there, which I don't think I ever will go back to that, because that was
Yeah.
just what it was. And that anxiety and fear of not being enough and not being good enough and all that carry on. However, I have experienced a very strange, and I don't even know how to describe it, kind of energetic shift in the last 2 years. And a lot of things happened in my life kind of outside of me. I nearly died of COVID, got a breast cancer diagnosis, um, anyway, fear mongered a bit around bone density. What else happened? About my boys are all gone. That was devastating to me. Anyway, so a load of stuff. Mum died, two good friends died, just a lot of stuff where it literally made me stop and
Yeah.
reevaluate. But I went through an awful lot of very deep emotional stuff and massive grief, massive grief. And I've processed that over the last, I'm going to say over the last 2 years. People say, oh my God, does it take that long? Not necessarily, but I kind of do it slowly, because it's almost like I'm documenting, and then I'll be able to use all of the stuff that I learn for clients going
To help
forward. So
others.
I put myself through the ringer a bit. So when you're saying, like, do people get great results, and
Mhm.
they're always the trend or whatever? Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
then after a while, I believe, and that's why we're here. We're here to learn, evolve, and grow. I think I had huge learning, evolving, and growing many years ago when I overcame that anxiety, enough that I was able to help an awful lot of people since then. And I
Yeah.
think that my next involvement was this last 2 years, and it has been cathartic, to say the least. It's been massive. And you would probably have seen it. A lot of people would have seen it. I haven't been as out there. I didn't run an event for 2 years. We did one recently, and it was amazing.
Hmm.
Um, and sold out in 48 hours. And, like, it was just so easy, and everybody turned up. And even my energy afterwards, I didn't have to sit and recover for days. So I know that I've done the work on myself. Um, so what I think is that we have different stages in life where we're going to evolve. Yes, there will be massive transformations on the way, but it doesn't mean you've all the work done. Definitely not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Much as we wish that that we can put a final date on it. That's me. I'm enlightened. I'm healed. But yeah, there's always more layers. But no, I know what you mean exactly about people being ready for it. And that's why I used to do calls to, with clients who wanted to work with me in my Life Fellow program. And and it is, people feel like it's some kind of a sales technique, but it's not really. It's to check that you can
Yeah.
actually help this person. you know like you and I are similar in that you don't want somebody's money if you can't help them. You don't want somebody as a client if this is, that's not who we are. So it's really
Yeah.
important to have that check in to know that, yeah, I really believe I can help you and that you can change. But, so there's an element for people. There's an element, obviously, in being ready or being coachable, but there's an element of timing. But how do we know? Because we'll hear this a lot from people that, oh, I'll just wait until, maybe after the summer, or until the kids are, back in school. Or a lot of the time, people use timing as an excuse not to move forward, not to take that action. How can people know, intuitively that the timing is not right? Or how do they know if it's, an excuse, procrastination, fear of taking that next step? What would your advice be there?
To the person, I suppose what I would say to that always is that when the pain of staying the same gets greater than the fear of changing, then they will move. But sometimes that's too late. Why would
Yeah,
you let yourself get to that pain?
yeah,
So, I mean, I know I would have said this to friends, and friends that I know were well able for it over the years, when I'd hear the same thing, a bit of a droning about an issue or a problem. And then the next time I'd meet them, even though we talked about it, it's the same thing. And sometimes, just to pattern interrupt it, I would say to them, so how long do you want to stay feeling like that? And so, what do you mean? I said, well, last time you were here, you were feeling it. The time before we were here, you were feeling it. The time before, we talked about it, but you've done nothing. And it's not that I'm telling you to do anything or that you should do anything, but it's up to you to decide how long you're going to stay in that pain. And I
mm,
leave it with them generally. It's not for
yeah,
me to say that anybody should change. But also, I suppose, with friends, then, as I say, I'd be very careful with this now and who I'd say it to, but, I would be kind of saying to them that really when we're together, it would be nice if we had a different conversation, or, I'm happy to help you with that. But if you're going to stay stuck on it, then,
Yeah. Yeah. One of the questions I would ask is what would your ideal future self, what decision would they make?
exactly.
Because it's getting out of that stuckness to kind of visualize, who do I really want to be and how will
Yeah,
I behave
love
when
it.
I am that person? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you're a very intuitive person, and I've heard you many times in the past, make business decisions based on giving yourself space and time. Is this right for me, first of all, before I can go out and serve others? How have you developed that intuition over the
Oh my
years?
goodness, Ciara. I definitely had a number of kind of blows with that, where my ego would jump in and whatever. Yeah. So I suppose that I've learned to tune into it based on looking at what my motivation is. So back in pre 2009, or around 2009, when I said I went online, um, here at home, the boys were teenagers and or young teens, and all of the work that Jeff had went overnight. He worked in construction, and that was one of the biggest shocks to me, because basically our income was completely wiped out overnight. So that was a big thing, and it really made quite a difference to how we all experienced life, and
Yeah.
what was going on for us. So because of that, I was motivated by fear. And my motivation was all about, we need to make enough of a living to feed our children and whatever. So it was really real. Like we had to, to pay mortgage, to pay anything else. And that motivation, when I think back to it now, I can actually feel the feeling of the motivation in my body. And again, it goes back to getting familiar with how things feel. So I got more and more tuned into that over the years, because I suppose I was teaching that about emotions and about feelings and all of that. So when I got used to understanding that, and actually that all the decisions I would have made in the early days were actually very aligned to that, and they worked out quite well, even though it was fear based,
Mm.
which is interesting. But as time went on and business got better, and it didn't all get better all the time. Things changed, things moved, So, but I would definitely have learned an awful lot about intuition through that business, because there were things shifting and changing so often. So that was probably one of my biggest, I don't know, classrooms really,
Mm.
in terms of learning, but also in terms of friendships, and in terms of, the way let's just say you were interviewing somebody for a job, and they came in and on paper everything looks great, and they come across really well in an interview, but there's just something in the back of your mind that goes, there's something off here, but you cannot explain it and you can't say it. So, and you take the person on, and this happened to me before when I was in nursing, because I used to interview a lot, and then the person would turn up, and they turn up for the job, and then something would go wrong, and you go, that was it, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So that's an intuitive nudge, or a hunch. And when we practice, and I would have done a lot of practice over this with this over the years. So, and I actually teach it in 5D living, intuition, and how, all the different levels. But that would be the first one, is, check in with yourself and see, how many hunches have I had? What did the specific feeling feel like when I had the hunch, and how many of them were right or not? And that's what would start to teach you. Oh, I felt that feeling really strongly, and I know that feeling, and that was those ones were always right, and those ones, even though there was a hunch, there was something different about that feeling, and they were all always wrong. And actually, recently, this is with the last 2 years, where I've had all of this new learning and cathartic stuff. I literally had that sense that I needed to pull back and not run some of my programs, including QTT. I haven't run a QTT for 2 years, not to run live events. And then I was like, this is completely ridiculous from a business perspective. Like, this doesn't make any sense. But there was that feeling inside that I knew what I knew. Now, the other thing that I got was open a membership. And I was going, I've always said I would never, ever open a membership, because it means that I'm always on.
Yeah.
And I just knew the feeling told me to do it. And it actually has been my saving grace, because it's been amazing supporting people in that membership over the last
Yeah.
2 years, and my own involvement, because that was a lot easier in ways than running big events, doing big launches, running, training programs.
Less energy input.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
more
But
gradual. Yeah.
yeah, but the thing is that the finances of both sides actually has not been massively different.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I'm working, I suppose, a lot less, but it was all based in nutrition. And I kept saying, I even said it to the Min PPC. I kept saying, don't know why I'm doing this, guys, but I've just been told to do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to go with it. And I said, I'm not being told. And I don't want people to think, oh my God, you hear a voice. No, it's an intuitive feeling for yourself. And you just either know or you don't know. But I suppose that has come with practice. It's just, I know because I know. I'll tell you, Ciara, the day I had the mammogram, where I had the breast cancer diagnosis, I knew when I had that mammogram. I've had loads of mammograms in the years before, and I never would have had any feeling around it. I was sitting at this desk the day the results came. I didn't know that the results came. Jeff walked into the office and he left the envelope on the table. The minute the envelope hit the table, I went into fight or flight. I went
Wow.
about complete fight or flight. And I opened it and I was called back to Cork. Now, for anybody listening to this, I was very lucky. I was caught so early that, my treatment was quite small, but still, it's a
Yeah.
significant thing to happen. But I knew. Now, I've had other tests and I've gone back for mammograms. Obviously, I'm going to be checked for whatever number of years. When I'm going now for mammograms, well, so far anyway, I know that everything's okay.
Mhm.
I just know it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
and you just get so familiar with that feeling in your body that you absolutely know. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it is something you have to cultivate. But I think it's
yeah,
really important that what you said, that people often confuse that fear feeling, the fear response. We feel that fear in the depth of our belly,
yeah,
because we often say the gut feeling.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's distinguishing that, getting to know that
yeah,
feeling. And in my experience, intuition is always lighter. And there's that, I always said, I'm not starting a podcast, and look at me, look at us.
yeah, yeah. And I agree with you. It's a lighter feeling, and also it's almost like something comes into my body and it's grounded and solid, and it's the
Mm,
word is
mm,
yes or the word is no. It's like I can't explain it. It's just I know because I know this is the right thing to do, and I could
yeah,
not give you a logical explanation, but this is what I need to do. This
yeah.
is what's important. Yeah, yeah,
And it's trying to get out of that, that mind response that for you, as you say, this doesn't make business sense for me
yeah,
not to run these programs, but something is telling me. And it's to have that trust. I suppose it's not always easy, because not everyone is in that position that, they have a business set up.
yeah,
And I've experienced that fear of I need to push forward. I need to do something. But anytime I've pushed and pushed, which is a lot, I must say, it doesn't flow. Whereas this podcast has just, everything has flowed. I have had this most beautiful guests say yes, and everything has been easy. And that's that experience of that lightness and following it, rather than logically, I don't have time, is what my mind was telling me, but my body was just following the flow that was calling me.
yeah.
But yeah, so one of the ways in which people start to work with you is through your 7-day positivity project, which is a way to kind of get started into this, a very, gentle introduction to all that you do. Tell us a little bit more about what's in that, and, how that
Yeah.
benefits people.
So first of all, just to let people know that it's free. And a lot of people again would say that makes no financial sense. It's definitely worth at least 190
There's a
cents.
lot in it.
And I
There
would
is a lot.
agree it is. But I have a very, I mean, everybody that's been around me for a while would know that there's a statement that we have. It's all part of my brand, which is that no soldiers left behind. So I would hate to be leaving this planet thinking that I made everybody pay for something, they couldn't get a bit of me unless they exchange money, even though money is wonderful, don't get me wrong. And, it's really important. And I
We all
also,
need
there's
it.
another thing that women need to get their act together around.
Mm.
Money is a beautiful energy, and it's really important that we charge for what we do. However, I do know that sometimes people just maybe need a little taste of something, that's free, or somebody needs a program that's free that will help them. So we've had both. We've had people where they get the taste of 7-day positivity project, they go, I know I need to work more with Moira, or they get the 7-day positivity project and it just changes everything for them. And they might never need to work with me again. In fact, I met a woman, I was at a breathwork workshop a couple of months ago, and at the lunch break, we were outside and she came to me and she said, I didn't say anything inside, she said, but I was on all your free stuff through COVID. And she said, you literally saved my life. Her husband died of cancer, and she had a boy that unfortunately died by suicide. And she said, it kept her going. I never knew the woman, never met her, didn't know anything about her. But my intention always would be, when I'm giving something out for free, that I just hope it'll land in the right place. And if somebody wants to work with me and wants to pay me, that's absolutely fine. If they don't, that's okay too. So the 7-day positivity project, there is a lot in it. So, and the reason why there's a lot in it is there's no point in me giving the kind of something kind of, a bit blah, and without people being able to get a result. However, if somebody did download it, which you're all very welcome to do, you need to do a bit of work. You need to be open, a little bit like what we were talking about earlier on in the podcast. You need to be just a little bit open to maybe looking at things a different way. So I covered the golden rules in that, Ciara. So that's kind of a way of living. Give you an example of one of the golden rules, which would be understanding and that we all have our own unique model of the world. And you might be thinking, okay, what's that about? So I see things one way, my sister sees them another way, my brother sees them another way, even though we might have been in a room when we were children and something happened and we all believed we experienced the same thing, but we all perceive it differently based on our past experiences and our beliefs, or based on how we were on that day, etc. And because that is my model of my world, it's going to dictate what I do next and next and next and next. So when you're in your 30s and 40s and you're chatting with your siblings and they're having a real argy-bargy about the way somebody was treated that day, and you're going, other words, we're in the same room. So basically, we all have our own unique model of the world. And the point is that we don't judge. It's just our model of the world. And when we start to see and believe that and live, this is the whole thing about the Positivity Project. Yeah, you can watch all the videos, but if you start to live by it and go out and observe people and think, oh my God, she's got a really unique model of the world. It's very different to mine. That doesn't mean that hers is wrong. It doesn't mean that mine is right or mine is wrong. It's just they're different. So that is just one of the golden rules, but there's 4 of them. I also go through the codes, the 7 behavior codes, which is a framework that I've created myself based on my experience with clients. And I say that it is a framework that helps us to understand behavior. Now, I'm not saying that it is, obviously there are loads of ways of looking at behavior, but for me and for QTT practitioners and for clients, it's a very simplistic framework that dictates that we have 7 things that we're looking to fulfill every moment of every day in a bid to be happy. So when we've all of these things fulfilled, basically our subconscious mind or our ego or our spirit or our soul will be happy. And very briefly, they are to feel safe and secure, but also to have a bit of variety and excitement, which they are almost like opposites, but we need both, because you have a very boring life if you're just safe and secure and you don't have variety and excitement, but you have a very wild life if you only had variety and excitement, you didn't have any safety and security. So there needs to be balance. So that's 2. Then the third one is significance. That was my one. That was where I really had a lot of imbalance in that area, and that sits in the solar plexus in the body, and that's where I used to feel all of my anxiety. Then we go up to the next one, which is all around love. We need love, giving, receiving, self-love. We need to express ourselves authentically. That's the next one. And then we need to progress and grow, which is huge. We always need that feeling that we're moving forward. And then the last one is about connection and that sense of no separateness and that we belong. So once we've all of a sense of all of those things quite balanced in our life, then if you meet people and you were to ask them, how are all those things in life? If you find that they're very happy people, most likely they'll be balanced in all of those things. Yeah. So that's the code. And then I'll go through there's loads of other little techniques in there. The one with the lemon, which shows you how, when we look at different thoughts and pictures in our mind, that our body will actually have a reaction to that. So where we can create stress, where we're hallucinating about things rather than actually anything actually happening. So much
powerful our mind is. Yeah,
so much more in it. I can't even think now what else is in it, but there's loads.
And we'll put the link in the show notes. Yeah,
absolutely.
After this,
you're very welcome. Yeah.
So Moira, my goal with this podcast is to help people kind of step into that higher vibrational state where our mind and body is in alignment, coherent. For you, whenever you feel your vibration slipping when you're maybe in a little bit of a low mood, low vibration.
Yeah.
What techniques do you reach for first? What are your go-to habits?
It's interesting because it's probably changed in the last 2 years a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first thing I think is that is massive, Ciara, is awareness. So if we're not aware that it's happening, then you're on the road to nowhere. So I would say to anybody that's watching this, and if you're fairly new on your journey, to make a commitment to being aware. And what I mean by that is just noticing what is going on. And often how I get people to do that is to, we all have devices that do have alarms and chimes and things. So have something that might do a little bing every hour. And then check with yourself and say, okay, in the last hour, how aware was I of, whatever behavior or whatever it was? And that just helps us to become aware. Now, if you weren't aware if you're only aware for 2 minutes, that's fine. Don't beat yourself up. Just see if you can be aware for 3 minutes the next hour or 4 minutes the next hour. So that's just, and you're observing how you're feeling, and also maybe observe what might have happened outside of you to create that feeling on the inside. And remember that nothing outside of us can make us feel a certain way. That's something that we unconsciously choose to feel. And I know that we do a lot of that by default, as in fear reactions and things like that obviously will happen, and sadness and hurt. If somebody breaks up with you or whatever, of course, the natural reaction would be to feel hurt and abandoned or whatever. And it's really important that we allow ourselves to feel that and just to become aware. So awareness definitely would be my first. Now, I suppose when we look at getting low and getting a bit flat, or our vibration going down, if I just explain just very briefly the kind of four well, these are there are 4 levels of consciousness, if you want to call them that, that Peter Sage talks about. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Ciara, but I use them a lot in my teachings. I think they're very helpful. The first level is to me consciousness, which is very victim, very flat, that's very dense, and it's very low vibration. So that is where people are really stuck and they're blaming everything outside of themselves for the stuckness. Nothing wrong with that. And remember, that's the level of consciousness that they're at. So there's no judgment on that. That's just the way, and all of us could be stuck on that if we didn't have the opportunity to have help, or to be aware that there is help available. So, when you meet somebody that's stuck like that, please don't be awful to them. Even though I find it very draining being around someone that's in that energy, it's just because it's a low vibration. That's what it is. Okay. The second one then is what we call by me consciousness. And that's really about where you realize, oh, I can make a change, and I'm an achiever, and I'm going to take the steps, and I'm going to take the action. And the whole coaching world would be very around that. I'm not saying only, but coaching is great for getting people to buy me. So they take responsibility, get on with it, do it. The next one is through me consciousness. And that's where we go into a higher vibe, and it's more around manifestation and understanding and knowing that you doesn't have to be hard. And that's kind of flow state. So that's really beautiful. And then the last one is the most divine. And this is the one that I've been invited to go into over the last 2 years, and that's more as me consciousness, and that's where we connect with oneness. And that to me, I'm not going to say like anybody can do that, and there's lots of practices you can do to go there, and it's basically where you go deeper within, rather than ever looking outside of you to create your happiness and your joy and your bliss. And it's the lightest and the freest vibration, and it's beautiful. And also, am I in it all the time? Absolutely not. Do I get triggered? Yes, I do. Do I go back to the victim? Yes, I do. We all go up and down through them all the time. So I don't want anybody to think, I'm so evolved that I'm sitting up there, arming and being at one all the time. If you are, you're not human. So we all are human. We all have ego. So we're going to go up and down through them all. But I suppose my focus now is more bringing people to that more expanded consciousness. And PPC, the membership, that's what happened. Because when we went in first, I had a founding members launch, so a lot of the people knew me. And I had a load of things organized and set up for them in there. And they told me, no, we don't want that. We don't want that. So I ended up doing a lot less in there than I thought I ever would. And I'd coaches set up and all sorts. No, they didn't want. And what really was the feedback was they wanted more and more of understanding that more expanded consciousness. So yeah, we use practical stuff and we talk
Yes.
about practical stuff all the time too, but there's a lot of what I call I ams. They're a type of a meditation and activation that I use to
Hmm.
bring them into that state. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, I suppose, a long-winded answer, I suppose, again,
That's
to
fabulous. Yeah, yeah. And it's
vibration.
interesting.
Yeah,
I just heard David G saying recently, I was on a live with him on Insight Timer, and somebody asked the question of, when people are in that to me consciousness. Now they didn't phrase it that way, but the victim,
yeah.
blame, it's not
3D.
my
Yeah,
fault. How do we protect ourselves from that energy? And he said, you don't protect yourself from that energy. You raise your vibration. When you raise your vibration, nothing's going to affect you. So I just thought that was a beautiful shift. And, a lot of the time we get
yeah,
caught up with this thinking, that we have to protect ourselves from the negativity of the world. But if we focus on
yeah,
ourselves, on our healing,
yeah,
on our own love, self-love, and raising ourselves, everything else
yeah,
fades
yeah.
into the
And I'm,
distance.
I'm not going to say this next bit is going to be easy, but it's a, like you say, what tips would I have? So, and I need to explain those levels of consciousness first, and to say that I'm not always in the top one. Don't think for a second that I am. But if I do get a low time or a low day or a feeling that even I've noticed, because a lot of things that Jeff does triggers me. That's my husband, by the way, and like all husbands, we go around blaming them all. And I've noticed, and we're very open about it. We talk about it all the time. And I've said, "Oh God, when you do that, it'll drive me mad." So and that's just a simple example, but also I would use this for bigger examples, and it goes back to the as me consciousness. So if I feel that there's a trigger coming, I just stop myself and I just go, okay, go inside and just tune into yourself and tune into all that's available to you on the inside. Happiness, joy, bliss. Is it really important that I need to comment on what just happened there? Do I really need to do that? And if I do, who's having the fun? And it's my ego. It's my ego
Mm,
that's having the fun. So I just come back to me because I'm not my ego. I separate myself back from it, and then I can kind of have a little bit of sense of humor around my little human that's just decided that she wanted to have a bit of a hissy fit because she wanted
yeah.
to prove to Jeff that she was right and he was wrong. So I'm looking at it from this higher consciousness, going, "Are you for real, Moira?" Like, and you
There
get
you
your
go
ego playing.
again. Yeah.
Come on now, and that actually sets me free. That sets me free. So that
Mm.
really does help me. Now, if and I might say it, and sure people can, if it's right for somebody, will be. The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, has really helped me with
Mhm.
that. Now, but I'm just going to put a caveat on the Power of Now. I bought that book 15 years ago. I could not read it. I couldn't get beyond. Oh, it was like wading through quicksand. I
Yeah.
absolutely, when I say devoured it in the last year or two, I didn't read it quickly. And now normally I read very quickly,
Mhm.
even personal development books, because I take it on and I say, I'm going to take that with me and I'm going to use that and use that and use that. But I usually go through quickly. So it took me months to read it, but I absolutely loved every
Mm.
word of it,
Mm.
because I suppose my own level of consciousness was different to what it was 15 years ago. So I was
Yeah.
ready for it. And that has helped me hugely with being present, being in the now, because all we have is this moment. We can project into the future and we
Absolutely.
can make it really exciting, which I'd really encourage people to do, or we can make it really scary, which I would say, please don't. So and if you're doing that, come back to the now, because all you have is the now. And definitely what's happened in the past is gone. It's done. I'm not saying that we don't learn from it. Of course we do. But we get the learnings and we let go of the feeling and we
Yeah.
stay in the now. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would have had a very similar experience. And I think we're alike in that we're fast movers, where we like results, we like, to achieve goals. And I think it was, I don't know how old that book is, but it possibly is 20 years ago that my sister-in-law gave it to my husband. And I was like, oh my God, this is just too slow. And another book of his, Stillness Speaks. And, again, over the years, I'll come back to it and come back to it. I've done his course, Become a Teacher of Presence. And yeah, gradually we can really understand the beauty and the peace and the joy that comes all in that present moment. But just to step back to what you were saying there about being triggered, because when I'm triggered, um, it's gratitude that releases me. I'll always shift into gratitude. I've got that practice now where when I feel the irritation or the anger start to come,
Yeah.
it's okay. What can I see that I'm grateful for in this moment, in this person, in this experience? And it really just opens you back up to, as you say, that higher consciousness space of, you know, who do I want to be?
Yeah, yeah. And like when I'm teaching about triggers to my students or everybody that's in PPC, we've great fun with them. I say when somebody says, "Oh, I was really triggered," and I said, "God, you're so lucky," and they go, "What? What? What?"
Yeah.
I say, "Yeah, you're so lucky because once we're triggered, all that is just is a reaction in us about something that the next thing we need to work on or look at." And again, if we detach ourselves from the human and the part of us that's having the hissy fit, we can work it out and we can do it with compassion and we can do it with love and we can take care of our human, but also it doesn't mean that we have to stay in that awful energy of being triggered and feeling that there's conflict or a lot of conflict going on in our lives. And that's what creates peace and joy. I mean, the number of people that would say, even with the Positivity Project, where they're saying their family situation, particularly with siblings, has transformed because they've just started to apply some of the golden rules and understanding that
Absolutely.
we're not our triggers, we're not our responses, and just be a little bit compassionate with ourselves.
Absolutely.
I have a bit of a
And
sense of humor.
yeah. And tell me this about joy. What's bringing you joy right now?
Okay, so the biggest thing in my life that will always bring me joy is my three boys, my three sons, Joe, Dan, and Connor, 30, 28, 27 at the moment, but they are absolutely fabulous. And they just bring me so much joy, as does Jeff. Don't get me wrong. It's like Jeff and I are kind of like, I would say that, when people say, "Oh, he makes me complete." No, he doesn't. I'm complete.
Yeah.
He's complete. We're both complete beside each other, but we are so solid. And like we're together all the time, which is lovely. So they would be my favorite people, and they bring me so much joy. But last year we bought a camper van, Ciara, and that's bringing me joy at the moment.
Fabulous.
Now the jury was really out in the beginning. I just was saying, "Oh, I don't know about this now," But anyway, we did a trip recently, and we did the NC 500 in Scotland, which is the whole north coast of Scotland, 500-mile thing, and we had the most divine weather. It's like unbelievable in May, not a midgie anywhere, and it was absolutely stunning. So that was joy. And we've done all of Ireland last year in it. Even in February, we were up in Sligo, and so it's great fun, great fun. And will it be something that'll bring me joy in 3 years' time? I don't know, but if it isn't, we'll sell it and we'll do something else. Traveling, and my boys, my four boys. That's my joy. And also work. I mean, like people say to me, will you ever retire? Or even with a conversation with somebody with lunch with them during the week, they were saying, like you've got to a stage down. And I know that it's great that, I don't have to force the business or I don't have to work, which probably sounds a little bit, egoic, but I don't have to work. But at the same time, I can't imagine not doing something because it does. I can watching a person get a realization where it's going to change their lives. Like, I mean, you've seen it, your clients the same. But when you see somebody do that, and I know that and I don't feel that thing of, oh, I did that, because actually I used to feel that a bit. And it actually, not that I've said it, it actually feels a bit ick. I don't like that feeling. But when you watch somebody just get it and you think, oh my God, that's just amazing. That's joy. Yeah.
That is joy. Yeah. And I hope one day to have the impact that you have had in the world so far. And I know there will be a lot more to come. And, I want to thank you. And I'll do that on behalf of all the thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably at this stage, more of people that you've helped. So thank you for being in my life, for being my friend, my mentor, and teacher over the years. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your wisdom and beauty with the world.
You're so welcome, Ciara, and thank you for having me. It was just lovely having the chats.
So I hope you found this conversation as valuable as I did. Moira's wisdom, her honesty, and her grounded approach to transformation is always a reminder that change doesn't have to be dramatic. You just have to want it, first of all, and then take the first step. The support and the help is out there. Moira has some really great programs like Wake Up and Change Your Life, Wealthy Minds, and a membership program called the Positive Pulse Collective. But as she mentioned in this interview, probably the best place to start is with her 7-day positivity project. And this free training is expansive and brilliant. If today's episode resonated, be sure to follow, subscribe to the podcast, and share it with all of your friends. And remember, if you want to take any of this work deeper, you could start by taking the free high vibration reset quiz, and that will help you uncover what's really blocking your next level of success. And if you're looking for accountability or focus, check out the Life Flow Planner and the Life Flow community. The links you will find in the show notes. And until next time, keep your energy high, your vision clear, your nervous system calm, and have a beautiful inner day.